The rancher came to town for one simple reason: to buy a cow before the winter storms closed the mountain trails. He never imagined he would leave carrying something far more precious. As he inspected the frightened animal tied outside a weathered stable, a tiny hand gently tugged at his coat. A little girl, no older than 6, stood barefoot in the snow. Her cheeks were red from the freezing wind. She looked around to make sure no one else could hear. Then she whispered words that froze the rancher's heart. "Please, Mom won't be here tomorrow." He frowned. "What do you mean?" The little girl glanced toward a weak young woman sitting against a wooden fence, struggling to stay awake. "Mom says if she sells our cow today, we'll have enough money for me to eat for a few days. After that, she says God will take care of me." The rancher had come to buy livestock. Instead, he had just stumbled into the hardest decision of his life. Stay until the very end, because this isn't a story about buying a cow. It's about one little girl's whisper that changed 3 lives forever. If you love emotional Wild West stories with unforgettable endings, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. The rancher had ridden into the frozen frontier town with only one purpose: to buy a healthy milk cow before another snowstorm closed the mountain trails. He had no idea that before sunset, he would be making a decision that would change 3 lives forever. Stay until the end, because one tiny whisper from a little girl would lead to a choice no one in town expected. And if stories of kindness, courage, and second chances touch your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more unforgettable Wild West journeys. Nathan Cole rarely came to town unless business demanded it. His ranch sat nearly 20 miles beyond the valley, where endless fields stretched beneath snow. Covered hills and silence had become his closest companion. Years earlier, he had buried his parents, lost the woman he hoped to marry to a deadly fever, and slowly accepted that life had chosen loneliness for him. He worked from sunrise until long after dark, speaking more often to his horses than to another human being. This winter had been unusually harsh. Several of his dairy cows had grown too old to produce enough milk, so he needed another before the season became even colder. After tying his horse outside the livestock market, Nathan walked through rows of frightened cattle while traders argued loudly over prices. One skinny brown cow caught his attention. She looked healthy despite her rough coat, and the owner was asking far less than the animal was worth. Nathan frowned. "Why so cheap?" The old farmer rubbed the back of his neck. "Need money today," he muttered. "Can't afford to wait." Nathan studied the animal carefully. Something felt strange. The farmer wasn't looking at the cow. He kept glancing across the snowy street. Nathan followed his eyes. Near the corner of the general store sat a young woman wrapped in a worn gray shawl. Snowflakes gathered on her shoulders, but she barely noticed. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow, and one trembling hand rested against an old wooden crate beside her. Standing close against her was a little girl, no older than 6, wearing shoes that were too small and a patched winter dress that barely protected her from the freezing wind. The child wasn't crying. She was simply watching every passerby with quiet fear. Nathan couldn't explain why, but something about them refused to leave his thoughts. He finished paying for the cow and accepted the rope. As he turned to lead the animal away, he noticed the little girl staring directly at him. For a brief second, their eyes met. She hesitated, then she slowly walked toward him. Her tiny boots crunched softly through the snow. Nathan knelt so he wouldn't frighten her. "Hello there," he said gently. She looked back toward her mother, making sure she couldn't hear. Then she stepped closer. Barely above a whisper, she spoke words that froze Nathan more than the winter air ever could. "Please, my mommy says she won't be here tomorrow." Nathan felt every sound around him disappear. The shouting traders, the horses, even the wind seemed to fall silent. He looked toward the young woman again. She was coughing into her sleeve. When she lowered her hand, he noticed a small stain of blood on the worn fabric before she quickly hid it. She hadn't seen her daughter walk away. Nathan's heart tightened. "What do you mean?" he asked softly. The little girl lowered her eyes. "Mummy says if she can't sell our cow today, We won't have enough money for medicine. And she told me to be brave when she's gone. Nathan swallowed hard. He had come searching for a cow. Instead, he had found a little girl preparing to lose her mother. And without realizing it, the loneliest rancher in the valley had just reached the crossroads that would decide the rest of his life. The rancher carried the weak mother and her little daughter to his ranch before the winter storm grew worse. His house had been silent for years, but that night the crackling fireplace, warm blankets, and a simple bowl of hot stew brought life back into every room. The little girl smiled for the first time in weeks as she watched her mother slowly regain her strength. The rancher quietly asked the town doctor to visit, paying every expense without expecting anything in return. As the days passed, he learned the mother had once owned a small dairy farm with her late husband. After losing him to illness, debts forced her to sell everything except one old cow. The very cow he had come to buy. She had planned to sell it because she believed she would not live long enough to care for her daughter. Instead of taking the cow away, the rancher bought it and left it with her, saying, "Your future is worth more than any animal." Those words changed everything. The frightened child finally believed tomorrow might come after all. Spring arrived quietly, and with it came a warmth that seemed to settle not only over the valley, but inside every heart on the ranch. The snow had melted into rushing streams, the fields turned green again, and the lonely ranch that had once echoed with silence now carried the sounds of laughter, tiny footsteps, and hopeful conversations. The little girl who had once whispered that her mother would not survive another day now ran through the pasture chasing newborn calves with a smile that could brighten even the darkest morning. Every laugh reminded the rancher that the greatest blessings often arrived when a person stopped looking for them. The young mother regained her strength little by little. She insisted on helping around the ranch, refusing to feel like a burden. She repaired clothes, prepared warm meals, cared for the dairy cows, and soon began making butter and fresh cheese using the knowledge her late husband had once taught her. The rancher noticed that everything she touched seemed to improve. The kitchen felt warmer, the barn more organized, and even the workers smiled more often. She had not simply recovered. She had brought life back into a place that had forgotten what happiness sounded like. News of the remarkable change spread across the frontier town. The same people who had once watched the struggling mother with pity now traveled to the ranch to buy her butter, cheese, and fresh milk. Before long, the little dairy business became one of the most respected in the county. Ironically, the old cow the rancher had originally intended to purchase became the foundation of an entirely new future. What had seemed like an ordinary business trip had become the beginning of a miracle no one could have imagined. One afternoon, while repairing a fence together, the rancher finally confessed something he had hidden for months. He admitted that before meeting them, he believed his life would always be empty. Every evening he had returned to a quiet house, convinced that happiness belonged to other people. He thought buying another cow would simply be another day's work before returning to the same lonely existence. Instead, one frightened little girl's whisper had changed the direction of his entire life. Looking toward the farmhouse where the child and her mother were laughing together on the porch, he smiled and admitted that they had rescued him every bit as much as he had rescued them. The young mother looked at him with grateful eyes filled with quiet understanding. She gently reminded him that kindness never travels in only one direction. The moment he chose compassion over profit, he had unknowingly given all three of them another chance to live instead of merely survive. Months later, beneath the shade of an old oak tree overlooking the ranch, the two quietly married in a simple ceremony attended by neighbors, ranch hands, and grateful townsfolk. The little girl proudly carried wildflowers instead of expensive decorations, believing they were prettier because they had grown naturally from the same land that had given them hope. Years later, travelers passing through the valley often admired the prosperous ranch without knowing its remarkable beginning. They saw healthy cattle, thriving fields, and a joyful family working side by side, never realizing everything had started because One lonely rancher stopped thinking about buying a cow long enough to hear the trembling words of a frightened child. The greatest miracles rarely begin with wealth or power. They begin when someone chooses compassion instead of convenience. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more unforgettable Wild West stories where one act of kindness changes generations forever.